Hello, hello, everybody. Turn down the music a little bit. Jeez. I was just wondering, people that are in the Discord right now, does it say that the event is live? Because I think Discord fucked up and it just like disappeared like instantly, which is freaking annoying. Bunch of people coming in. Lovely to see you all. Hopefully my audio is good, because I got a new mic as well. So, testing a whole bunch of stuff today. Darkon, you got a notification for it. Okay, cool. It's good to know. Thank you. And it's good to see you here as well. I'm gonna switch on over to the cam here directly. You're just talking into the void right now. Sounds great. I don't know. I'm getting like, I don't know, partially deaf or something like that. I don't know what's happening, but because I was comparing like the two mics and I was like, what's the difference here? I think it does sound better, and it also comes up. It's also like a bit more future-proof as well, and it has like a pop filter now, which is great. Yeah, we'll see. I'll probably just have to listen to the recording now to get like the actual sound. Let me switch on over as well. Hello, hello, beautiful people. Who do we have today? We got Max, Anime Eye, Ryan, Sulan, Darkon, Rita, Giovanni, Bodhi, and Raul. Awesome to see you all. Hope you're all doing well. And Justin as well. Used to some stuff now. Hello, Hamza. How's it going? I need to be careful with this new mic because it has like a little touch zone, and sometimes I touch it and then I mute myself, so... If it's really quiet all of a sudden, feel free to spam the chat. Gonna be a fun thing to watch out for. But yeah, hope everyone's doing well. It's been a pretty busy week, honestly. It's honestly been a bit of like one of those like nose to the grindstone kind of weeks where I've been doing a lot of work on the book. So as some of you know, like the weekly tips PDF, right? That is like you basically get that as like a welcome package. You basically get that as like a welcome package if you become a member, but we're actually going to turn that into like a proper physical book as well. So we're working together with a designer, Ricardo, who is a part of the team and is going to be joining us for the team challenges as well to help us organize that too. But he does design like books and flyers and all that stuff. Well, that's like a profession. So we've been collaborating on that. And now it's basically because we have like a new design, we need to find a way to like poured over all the content basically. So that's literally what I've been doing, like copy pasting and adjusting and tweaking, and the next phase is probably going to be like spell checking and doing like tweaks to the design as well. But yeah, it's a lot of work. It's like 250 pages, so I think I'm like 75% of the way there. I've been, like I said, like it's just coming home, making food, and then just copy and pasting for like a couple of hours before I go to sleep. But weirdly enough, I do enjoy it though. Like there's something, I don't know. It's like easy work, right? So I don't have to think about it. So I can have like, I don't know, something on YouTube in the background, which is kind of cool. But yeah. Hey, Justin, saving a spot on my desk for this book. I can't wait for it to be published. Yeah, me either. Like, there's gonna be like lots of learnings with this as well. But I can't wait to have like my own copy either. And still in the same, would love to have a physical copy on my bookshelf too. Yeah. Like honestly, it's the first time that we're really doing something like this. So we're probably gonna do one of the next things that I'm gonna do apart from like merging all the content over and doing like design work is actually setting up like a form or like an email list or something like that, so that we can gauge how many people want like the actual physical book. To just get like a rough number of how many people want that book, and then based on that, we'll do like a limited print as like a first limited print, and then we'll see where we go from there. But that's the current idea. Yeah, like I said, other than that, I've not been doing that much. I mean, not much. Just going to work. You know, like just stereotypical like working day, and then doing like a bunch of stuff after it. Yeah. Hudson, a red alert typhoon here right now? Oh shit, I hope you're doing okay. I was doubting between all right and okay, but I hope you're doing both. But yeah, that's been going good. Oh, also, like there was like a whole bunch of shenanigans going on with yeah, we're getting like tickets, like business tickets for Gamescom, right? Which would basically mean that I can get access to like the business area, because Gamescom has like I don't know, like 7 halls or something like that, and I think 1 or 2 are like reserved for only business tickets. And I've always just gone as like a regular visitor, so I never had access to that part. So this is the first time when we're actually gonna have access to like that area as well. So I can't wait to check that out. I think that's gonna be awesome. Build like a whole bunch of new connections. I'm honestly just going there for like beyond extent, right? And hoping to build like some cool little bridges, and hopefully talk to people that can then join us and do like workshops and all that kind of stuff. I think that's gonna be good. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. And then obviously we also have like the meetup on that Wednesday as well, which is gonna be freaking awesome. So I can't wait to see you all there. I don't want to keep waffling on for too long though, because we have a whole bunch of people that we need to get through today. I think we have 17 people. So yeah, we're gonna switch it straight on up, and we're gonna have a look into things. So for people that are new to the stream, first of all, welcome. What we're gonna do today, as I do every week, the same time on Wednesday, is we're gonna be looking at work from our community, and then I'm gonna give feedback on that as well. So everyone in our community can like tag their work to get like personalized feedback from me. So that means that this week we have like 17 people's work to look at. So what I'll do is I'll look at the Discord. You can't see that, I have that up on my second screen. I basically go through like what people want a feedback on, and then we'll just like go a little bit back and forth, and then just move on to the next person. So yeah. That being said, let's get started. So the first person that we're going to be looking at today is probably going to be like relatively quick. So let's see. Where is Jasper in this list? So this is a little bit more of a weird one, because Jasper doesn't necessarily want like feedback on the work. But what I wanted to give Jasper is just, we're going to be talking a little bit just about how to prepare yourself better for your next environment. So, because the reason why I say that is because Jasper like started working on this environment, and then was in the middle of doing it, and then he dropped it because he realized that they realized that he didn't know like anything about materials in Unreal Engine. So we're going to be talking about that. The first tip that I want to give here is you gotta build towards your skill set. Obviously, you gotta challenge yourself, but what you encountered is something that was like way too challenging for your current skill set, right? So what we mean with building to your skill set is there are like rules in psychology, and I'm not a psychologist myself, but I've listened to like a lot of talks about it, where there's like an 80 to 20% rule. And this seems to be like, we use this in art as well, right? Like 80% like areas of rest versus like 20% areas of detail, so that we can kind of like play them off in like a really nice way. But in this case, what 80 to 20% means is that 80% of it needs to be something that you're comfortable with. Right? So those are the skills that you're already like pretty good at. And then the 20% is where you're going to push yourself. Or like you're going to challenge yourself. Let's call it that. So that means that whenever, let's say, I don't know your skill level specifically, but let's assume that we started out from like scratch and you wanted to make like a whole environment. That is never going to be feasible because you don't have like a lot of the skills that you need, right? So you need to look at like your current skill set in that way, where you can tell like, hey, I know how to model pretty good. I know, oh, hey, Hudson, that's yours. Okay, cool. So, yeah, you know how to model like pretty well. You know how to like texture decently. Then you just need to make sure that you can showcase something that does that, and then challenge yourself when it comes to like maybe making like a more complicated model, right? Let's see what you're saying. So yeah, I learned a lot. One thing is that I can't use the bottom left trim on the glass because they use a different blending mode. Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that you're gonna learn, right? So that is completely normal. I think you could use it, but then you're throwing out like a lot of performance, and it doesn't make sense anymore to keep that on there, right? So that might be like a thing to think about. Like a trim sheet, I usually treat that like by material. So for example, if you have like a lot of wood stuff and like a lot of metal stuff, I would make like 2 separate trim sheets, one for wood and one for metal, right? In your case, you're doing sci-fi shapes. I would honestly do like a lot of decals and a lot of kind of just like generic sci-fi paneling stuff, right? Have that as a trim sheet. And then if you want to build like another trim sheet for like, let's say greebling or something like that, split that off in like a separate trim sheet, right? It's just to make your life like a little bit easier. And also it's going to give you like more flexibility in the future as well, if you want to reuse those things too. Yeah, so split that up by material. Yeah, I just wanted to really quickly dive into that. I just want to help you get set up better for like the future, right? I want you to actually start out with a project that you know that you can finish, because it is both leading into like the stuff that is comfortable to you, but then also challenges you like for 20% of the time. That's the ideal like separation that we're trying to aim for, roughly. Thanks, Tim. To be honest, I could finish this, but I'm always scared that I don't know stuff. There's always stuff that you don't know. Like it's really difficult to know the stuff that you don't know, right? Like the main way that we learn stuff is by doing the things and then failing at them, right? So that's also like my first point here is like, okay, we tried this, like we ran into a big wall that we didn't anticipate that was going to be there. What have we learned from running into that wall, and how can I take that lesson to like my next environment, right? And if you do that enough times, like you're gonna get like really streamlined, right? So not knowing stuff, that's nothing to be scared of. You should honestly just see that as like a challenge, right? And like an opportunity to learn. Yeah, because honestly, like, if you're gonna work in games, you're gonna be learning a lot all the time, right? Because there's so many things that changes. The workflows change, like the graphical fidelity changes, the scope of the world changes, the way that teams work changes. There's going to be a lot of learnings. Yeah, so you got sidetracked because I don't know how a lerp works. I get easily discouraged when I start to follow a function I don't fully understand. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like if that is something that you don't understand, don't try to make a whole environment. Try to just keep it simple and focus on like material work, right? And then build your skill set up until you can then do like the bigger environment art stuff. Hello, Rishi, over on Twitch. Lovely to see you. Welcome, welcome. Hello, Dennis. Hello, Coffee. Hello, Snowbat. Lovely to see you all here. Hamza was asking the question where I can find a Discord, and that link is in the description down below. So you can just go to our website, and then you can make an account over there. Yeah, that's some learning stuff that I wanted to just get into. Keep it small, keep it simple, and just like improve in those incremental steps, because you don't want to keep running into that wall, because that's going to demotivate you, right? Yeah. So scale it down, make it simple. Like, think about like these kind of things. Like, for example, you're learning material work, right? I would honestly do like a whole bunch of materials in like a week or two and just focus on that, right? And don't think about like putting it on your portfolio or anything like that. Don't try to build like something around it necessarily. It is probably way more efficient if you can just focus on like getting really to the core of like what you need for materials, rather than building like a an environment around it that is just gonna take like a bunch of time to make, right? Yeah, hopefully that helped. A move on up. So Rishi is asking, so what exactly should I hold up, my brain is just malfunctioning here. What should I know to land a 3D environment art job in the video games industry? If you go to our YouTube, like there's like a whole bunch of like podcasts that we did on exactly that. There's a whole bunch that you should know. So yeah. There's a whole bunch that you should know. I'm not going to get into it too much here because that would take like a lot of time, but we do have a podcast episode of like I think environment art responsibilities over on our YouTube channel as well. So feel free to go and check that out. And there's probably like other ones as well. Let's see. So who's next? We got Darkon next. Darkon is currently making a Doom 2 project. I have not seen Doom 2, and yeah, I don't know, maybe a hot take, but I don't really get why people love Doom. I don't know. We watched the first one, and I was just like, huh? I just really didn't get it. That's beside the point, though. There's just like a bass scene or something like that, right? Here I'm working on the hookah itself, which is the final piece. I'm having a hard time seeing how exactly it's constructed. Yeah, so I didn't take... Oh, sorry, we're still on the wrong person here. Where are you? Darkon. Here we go. Let's see. Yeah, hot take. Yeah, I really don't get it. I really don't. But it's awesome that people love it so much, though. You know? Like, I'm not gonna give other people shit for, like, liking something that I don't understand. It's fine. So, let's see. Here are the screenshots from the movie. So we have, like, a bunch of screenshots, like, down below as well to make a comparison. But I think most of what we're going to be talking about is the lighting, right? So, lighting, and then the hookah, maybe. Right, maybe we can think about that. But it's more about like finding good reference. Honestly, maybe we can look like straight at the hookah first. When it comes to reference for those, if you're lucky in this case and you don't have like any better shots than you currently have, right? For example, like this guy over here. It's an okay shot, but like you're not seeing the intricacies of the prop, right? Honestly, the luckiest that you're probably gonna get is if you can find like the original concept designer that built that prop. But for something that simple like a hookah, you're probably not gonna find that much. But it is worth looking at though. Try like reverse image search is probably not going to help you all too much here. But I would definitely look at some of the concept designs, and maybe you can even find like the Art of Dune or something like that, where maybe it's not from a movie, but like from another game that might have this in it as well. You will probably have to do like a lot of digging though. If you can't find it, you're gonna have to just come up with stuff and like basically design it yourself, right? You've got the silhouette, which is like the most important part. And I think for something like this, you can honestly get away with just the impression that it is like this weird looking object that is like slightly steaming, right? So I don't think you need to like redesign the whole thing to like 100%, but you could get away with like a very simple representation of it. So yeah, when it comes to the lighting, it's good that we have a comparison between the two, right? So I'm gonna give like some quick notes here. What we're missing is that your color of your lights is white, right? And from the images, we're getting blue tones. So that would be something interesting to incorporate. You can do that in the lighting already, or you can do that in post-processing. Rishi, like for a beginner, what would you recommend? Honestly, I'm sorry to say it again, but like go and watch that that episode that we did on that, because there is so much that I would recommend you to get into. Like if we're gonna go like a really high level and you have not done like anything in that direction yet, I would honestly just say download Blender and start modeling. Use that as like an introduction to things, right? Blender is free, so you can just use that to get started as well. Yeah. So let's see. It's honestly like pretty simple when it comes to lighting, right? In terms of like the setup of the scene itself. It just needs to be like a little bit more like bluish. Let's have a look. I think that's honestly mostly it, right? Yeah, finding ref is going to be hard because you're doing it with like, I don't know, screenshots from like a movie, right? That is like really recent, so. Ryan is saying, inventing details from fuzzy or small parts to the reference is tricky. Yeah, yeah, it really is. But like the benefit of this is that you got the silhouette and you just need to go for like something that feels like it, right? I would honestly also not make it like the main part of the scene. Like it's just gonna be just like a random prop on the side, right? It's just to add a little bit of flavor to the whole scene, but it's not like it's gonna be like the main focal point and like everyone's gonna be looking at this because it is so small. But yeah, not too much to add on the lighting part though. What I will say is that on a scene like this, it's textures and materials are the most important part. You want to focus on those two, and really what you want to do is make it as unique as possible, right? So in this case, that means that you have like a good base for tidables, but you really need to figure out like how you can increase or like how you can add like little bits of story in there, right? Like little scratches or little footsteps or like slight variation, right? I'm not talking about like making it super visible, but I feel like you need to be able to tell that like most people walk here compared to here somehow. Right? Or like some slight dust that gets like stuck in the crevices of the staircase and all that kind of stuff. Because that's like that attention to detail is going to carry through the whole thing. Because right now I do know that you have like you're only using 2 materials, which is like really great from like a performance aspect, but it's not great for like a scene that is all focused on material work because it feels a little bit too basic. Right? So that's something to really think about, and how can you make that like stand out more? So for example, you could have like your base tileable, right? So this is like your basic tileable that you already have. But then you have like these areas where you could make that with like decals or something like that, right? Just to add bits of variation. Because you need to be able to elevate it from like something that is just like a bunch of shapes with like a tileable texture slapped on top of it. And you need to be able to elevate that to like the next level somehow. That's also like, it's not an easy thing, right? It's really, really difficult to do a scene like this because the shapes are so simple and the materials are also like really simple, because it comes down to the subtlety and the layering, right? So this is not an easy thing to pull off, but it comes down to like the layering and like the subtlety of it. Rishi is saying, the only problem I face is with the placement of props in the environment, but thank you, I'll watch the podcast. Yeah, we have like a bunch of other workshops on that as well. We don't necessarily have one on the placement of props, which is something that we're trying to look at filling up in the future. But yeah. I do have like a bunch of like tips written on that in like the book as well. But yeah, I hope that's helpful, Darkon. Best of luck with the environment as well. I think it's really cool. You know, like it's a challenge by itself, but I like that you picked something that is like really condensed and like really closed off, and you can really just focus on like a single aspect to then just like lift it up to the next level. I think it's going to be really, really cool to see. So yeah, awesome work. I'll be keeping up with this, especially if you share it next week as well. Thank you so much. This helps me a lot. No worries. Thank you for sharing it as well. Also, hello, Helena. Good to see you here. Hope you're doing well. Coffee is saying I have the same problem with references. What works is doing some digging on the artists and the people responsible for it. Yeah. Like trying to find like the designers and like see if they did like the concepts for it could help a lot as well. That's a great shout. Let's see. Next up, we got Alex. Alex is making this a really cool, like submersible. Oh my god. I can't speak today. Submersible prop that is semi-stylized. Okay. Semi-stylized. And there's a bunch of questions in here. That's awesome. Thank you so much for preparing like a list of questions as well, Alex. That's always really helpful. It is super cute. Yeah, I like it. It's very Subnautica, right? It has that feeling to it, like the color scheme, the shapes, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly, McFall. Yeah, looks cute. Even though I haven't played it myself, it just looks like a really cute game. Okay, so let's dig into this. I'm struggling with making the horizontal big motors fit with the design. I would like some design suggestions here. Design suggestions. Well, first of all, I'm not a designer, so keep that in mind. Let's see. Oh, the horizontal ones. Guys? No, right? I like the big ones. Yeah, I'm guessing these guys. I honestly don't mind them too much. I think the way that you could potentially like play around with the silhouette is just adding like, I don't know, like a little rudder or something like that here. Right, because it's gonna be like a submersible thing anyway. And maybe adding like a rudder at the back too. I don't know. There's some fun shapes that you could really play around with the silhouette on this guy. Just to break up some of the shapes. And then maybe like a thing here that's going to be attached this way, and that's going to be rotating that way. So you have like left and right. So that could be cool. Maybe adding something like that as well. I honestly don't mind them too much otherwise. Probably if you want to go with like, I don't know, you want to go with like a little bit of a softer language, right? A little bit of a softy. Oh, no, it's wrong. This is wrong. That could be cool. You could add fins there as well. I think that could be cool. I think honestly, like I said before, design is not my strong suit, right? So I would have a look at some other design and see what you can incorporate. Like the fin at the back, I just literally gone from this guy over here, right? Like the ref that you have. That could be really interesting to incorporate. You have this sort of shape as well. It could be interesting too. Maybe to play around with that a little bit more, because it is just like a cylinder, right? So maybe in that case, if you have it like more, this is more like a torpedo shape, right? But something like that could make like the shape a little bit more playful as well. Hello, Alex. Then we would need to move like the fin up a little bit, right? Right, so something like that where you have like the torpedo shape coming in a bit more. And then maybe you could, I don't know how this is going to work, but maybe you could round this off way more as well. Just to play around with the more rounded shapes, right? Like really playing with that sort of feel. Yeah. Rounded shapes plus fins for the design. Hello, Guillaume. Hello, hello. Let's see, number 2. What problems stand out with the wireframe shots? The wireframe. Let's see. When it comes to the wireframes, like you do have like a lot of topology over here, especially on the top part of the wing, right? Which is pretty dense. You can like really optimize the whole thing. Because the only thing that you really want is like a couple of lines going that way, right? So that you can get like a slight curve if you were to watch it from like the side, right? So if we take this and we look at it from like a side perspective, you don't want it to be like a full block, right? You kind of want to have like a little bit of a curve on the top. And then just a little curve at the bottom too. But like most of the actual geo is probably going to be over here and on this side, right? Because you got like a tighter curve on these edges. So yeah, this just needs to be like a couple of edges over here, and then you can add like lots of dense geo over on the sides. because yeah, a lot of the stuff on the top can be removed. The same thing actually happens on the side as well, where you can easily cut like a lot of these like very dense sections, and the shape will still be fine, right? Especially because comparing to some other sections, like it's really low in terms of like density. So I would actually like remove some of the density here. This is gonna get chaos. So I want you to add like less here and maybe use the gains that you made to maybe like play around with the shape on the main body instead. That's what I would do. Just like taking some away from the main body, from the wings, and then maybe moving it over to the shape and like adding a little bit more of like a nicer curve, because this is just like a straight curve over here, right? Or like a straight line over here, which is something that you can just like easily remove there. So hold up, let's see. So you can optimize the wings. You can add more to the body. But let's see. Like some of these areas, like I'll give you a tip, right? Whenever I'm looking at wireframes, like the areas that I immediately go towards are the areas that are just completely the same color, right? Because that's a good hint at like density, right? So in this case, we're looking at like really dense orange sections. So like these lights, the stuff up here, let's see, stuff down here as well. Like those areas are like really dense, and I would look at if you can potentially like optimize them too. I know that most of these, so sometimes you'll have to make the choice of like, hey, this is like all rounded and like spherical stuff and it needs that sort of density. That's fine, but I try to look at it from like a perspective of I'm adding this amount of density on this sphere here. Right? So like the gaps between the geometry are like pretty big. You can probably get away with doing not the same sort of density, but like reducing the density on like all these guys as well. Just to make it like nice and clean. So I would always look for dense spots. Cool. Number 3. UVing, this is also a struggle. Thinking of buying Zen UV to help me. For texturing, should I use a trim sheet or just texture it in Painter directly? You can texture it in Painter directly if you want. This depends on how comfortable you are with trim sheets or with texturing. Because texturing in Painter is definitely going to be like the easiest thing because it's more like straightforward, right? Whereas with trims, you're going to have to do like a whole bunch of like thinking and planning and testing and all that kind of stuff. It also depends on like your experience level too, right? But if you're like inexperienced at this point, I would just go for like the quickest route. If you have a lot of experience with making trim sheets and all that kind of stuff, you could use trim sheets for this as well. Or you could even just use like a combination of multiple like tileable materials and maybe even just make it out of like pretty generic materials, right? So you have like a plaster material and a metal material that you can just like recolor and like tweak it without having to make like entire textures for it. So yeah, what I tend to recommend is always go for the easiest option. Unless you really specifically want to showcase that you can do trim sheets, for example. right? Well, like better said is that you want to showcase that like you can use trim sheets where they matter as well. Because for example, for a single vehicle, you would tend not to use a trim sheet in like a production environment. Because yeah, it wouldn't make that much sense, right? Unless you're using trim sheets on like all the vehicles or something like that, then it starts to make sense again. Yeah. Let's see. Will you use a 2K texture for all the prop? That depends on your textile density. Oh, the last thing that I wanted to bring up before we get into that like more technical stuff is it also depends on the kind of style that you want to go for, right? If you want to have like lots of dirt, lots of layering, all that kind of stuff, just doing like a unique texture in Substance Painter is going to be way easier than doing stuff with like trim sheets, because then it becomes like a technical hassle of like, hey, I have my trims, but how do I make it look cool on top of that, right? And that's like difficult to do. But if you ask me if you would like use one 2K texture, first it depends on the style a little bit, right? But most of all, it just depends on textile density. We actually have a PDF on our website that explains what textile density is and how to calculate it. And according to that, you can then figure out like what your texture size should be. So I would use that, but you kind of need to know what the density of your textures is going to be though. So if you want like a benchmark, like a recommendation is, I would go for 1024 pixels per meter. That's what I would use. That seems to be like very common these days. Let's see, other questions. For details such as the bolts and the panel cuts, should I model them, or would it be okay to just normal paint them in Substance Painter? I think for this, you can just model, you can just paint them in Substance Painter. It's gonna be like way easier. It's gonna be pretty fun as well. That's the way that I would do it. Especially if we're gonna be using Painter to do like the rest of the textures as well, right? Might as well continue that. Panels and bolts in Painter. Cool. Subnautica style. Yeah, I'm honestly not too familiar with how detailed they go with their textures. I have like a very simplistic like image in my head, right? So I don't think it's going to be too much. But I mean, even in that case, just going with like Substance Painter is going to give you all the flexibility that you need anyway. So I would go for that. Thanks for all the feedback. No worries, Alex. Thank you so much for sharing your work as well. And yeah, feel free to share more in the future too. Cool. Let's see. Next one up is from Olaf. So this is a arc visualization scene, but it is optimized for real-time rendering as well, which, I mean, we're not really looking into like the optimization, but yeah, a lot of stuff gets like real-time rendered in Unreal anyway these days. If someone could guide me in terms of like the overall quality of the work, what can I improve in terms of detail or composition? Something to make this work better, because I feel like it misses something, but I can't put my finger on it. So we're gonna go back to what we talk about a lot over here. Story. I don't think it's worth it to like implement a story into like an arc viz scene, right? But if you're doing your next scene, I would focus on the story and then showcase that story somehow, right? Like visualize that story. that is honestly like the main case of like becoming an environment artist, is that we get hired to build stories and locations for games, right? So we need to be able to do that. Like, I think this is like an interesting architectural visualization scene, right? It looks nice, the textures are nice, but it's also, it belongs more in a magazine than it does in like an actual game environment, right? So yeah, if you really want to sell yourself as like a games environment artist, right? Because that's why we're here, then I kind of want to see a story. That's what I would focus on next time, for sure. Because the reason why I harp so much on story is because once we have a story, we can then decide like how we visualize that story, right? But then also what is going to be important to pull our attention to. Because with an architectural visualization scene, we're not focusing on anything specific. We're, in most cases, when we're doing this for like an architecture firm, we're trying to sell the quality and the feel of the whole environment, right? But it needs to be like some sort of like a template that people can move into and make it their own thing, right? So it kind of needs to be like pretty dull when it comes to like making a scene like this, because that's the purpose of like what it's trying to do, right? It's trying to give you like a really nice looking like apartment, but it's supposed to uh yeah, it's supposed to make it attractive to you so that you can still make it yourself, right? Or like your own thing. So yeah, because with a story, we can then have a focal point and then have like supporting prompts and all that kind of stuff. But then we're actually trying to tell a story, right? You could still do that here. You could do like, I don't know, like a hangover type scene or whatever. But yeah, that's what I want to see. So you wanted to keep a cozy vibe? You could do that, right? But then still make it feel like, okay, who's living there, right? Like, again, with the story, who lives here? What do they do? Right? Like, these questions are like really important to ask, because now, again, we're not really getting anything. Mr. J, 3ds Max for ArcViz, did you know this? 3ds Max for ArcViz? I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, you can use any program for ArcViz, right? Especially if you use like offline renderers like Corona or I don't know, what are they all again? There's some really good like architectural visualization renderers, especially for offline purposes. Yeah, you can do. But yeah, that's what I'll say here. I know that we didn't really talk about like details or composition. The reason why is because the composition depends on what you're trying to show off. And right now I feel like there's not really anything to kind of show off rather than the whole thing by itself, right? Yeah. Let's see. Some other people were giving like some feedback as well. Yeah, interesting. Like even the rev that you have, right, has like a little bit more of like a focus. Like I'll bring it up here for people to see as well. Like this image has like more of a focus than your image currently has as well. Because your image feels like it's more like blown out, or like not blown out, but like equally lit across the whole room compared to the image that we just saw. Yeah, something to keep in mind. But yeah, I would say honestly focus on the story, because that's what it's all about for game environments. Try to tell a story with it. I hope that was helpful. I know that it's not like necessarily what you wanted to talk about, but I think this is going to be more helpful in the long term. I do like the combo of the main and the vibe reference. The warm tones are coming through. Some of the pastels might be missing, but the warm tone is there. Yeah, I think like honestly from like a looks perspective, like it looks quite nice, you know? But it's, yeah. There's just nothing of interest, right? Like it's more, I feel like that's like not really saying it correctly, right? But like there's nothing of interest in terms of visuals for us to look at. I feel like it's really interesting when it comes to like the technical aspects of it, but there's just not a lot of that. I don't know, there's nothing keeping us in the image. It's just nice. That's it. Yeah, but still, thank you for sharing your work though. I know that we kind of went hard on this one. But yeah, story is really important, Olav. I would, like I said, like you can keep this, right? I had like an architectural visualization scene on my portfolio as well at a certain point. But I went to that realization cycle as well, where it's like, yeah, it kind of looks interesting, but like there was no, I don't know. First of all, it was not what I wanted to do. And then also, like, it doesn't really say anything. The room is too big, so the bed is not the center of interest. I honestly think that the bed can't even be the center of interest, because there's nothing of interest happening. Right? Like even let's say we were to dim down like all the lights and we would only have like a light on the bed, then we have a focal point, but nothing is happening there, right? So we look at the bed and it's like, okay, cool, it's a bed. Right? So that's why I'm trying to look at like the story first, because that can actually be like the foundation of the scene, right? And it doesn't have to be much, right? Like it can be as cozy and as, I don't know, it can be anything you want, but just give us something to like look at. Like even stuff like the frame, right? Like the frame can like tell a story by itself. But it's just like, yeah, nothing there yet. On a technical level though, again, Olaf, looking really good though. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you're gonna do with this. Let's have a look. Next one up is Adam. Gave a little bit of feedback already during the week. But let's have a look. The main feedback today is on the lighting paths, right? And I think, honestly, putting them side by side is probably all I need to do. If you're trying to go for the vibes of the original one, right? It feels moody. It feels dark. It feels oppressive. Right? It has like all those like seedy undertones like built into like the frame here, and like the lighting and like the way that it's framed as well. Like even the camera angle coming from like down low, and then having like the houses be really tall, and like they kind of have there's like perspective distortion that happens where these lines are not straight, and what that does to the image is that it kind of makes the buildings feel bigger, and it kind of feels like they're like almost it adds scale and weight to them, right? I think that's something that you nail here though. But you kind of have to look at it from like a perspective of, okay, why do they do those things? And I think that why we're at like a lower angle and the buildings kind of feel like they're tall is because they want to make us feel like small, right? In comparison, because again, especially with like the dark and moody atmosphere and especially the oppressive nature of things, that's really what we want to feel with this, right? So it comes down to the height of the buildings and also like where the buildings are placed, because you're doing something that is actually like pretty common and would probably be my recommendation to do, where you're not putting like your horizontal line like in the middle of your frame, but you're putting it lower. But it's interesting to see that like the horizon line or like the separation between the frame here is almost in the middle. And it gives like a different vibe, right, between the two. I know we're talking about lighting. Yeah, I wanted to touch on that as well. Yeah, I think making it like way moodier, way darker, much more oppressive, I think that's probably the way to go, unless you want to turn it into like a completely different direction, right? Let's see. I also added like a super subtle spotlight from a lighthouse. Oh, visible in the video. Where's the video? Oh my god. Oh, that's cool. Let me showcase a video here as well. Can I open that link here? No. Okay, we're probably gonna have to do it this way then. Oh, was that this light? I'm not too sure actually what we're supposed to be looking at when it comes to the light of the lighthouse, right? Because immediately I'm like, lighthouse? Okay, I'm expecting like a moving light, like a rotating one, right? So maybe it's there, but it's just too subtle, or yeah. Make that light rotate. Let's see. Nope. Just down here. Let's not do that. Proportions and placement of objects. Oh, okay. We kind of talked about that already. Maybe the main house is too small as well. So I think honestly just having them side by side is probably the best thing that you can do whenever you're trying to replicate a concept, right? Because what I'm getting is that the building itself feels too small. It also feels like you have squished it, right? So it's not as chunky as the one in the main ref. So that's all stuff to like really look at. But I think the most important thing is why you're doing those things, right? Like, what is the purpose of like filling the frame up more? Because that changes like how you perceive the art, right? So if you purposely like start filling the frame, that can then again like lead it to feel like more oppressive, even like claustrophobic or something like that, right? So think about it in that way. Like purposely framing something. Yeah. It is cool though. It's cool to see come together. I like the splashes of the water. You know, that's not easy, but I like the way that it's already looking in like the video. Yeah, it's just like honestly like a really nice like little project to just like chip away on over time. Yeah. Looking forward to more updates. Ryan is saying there's a lovely mood in that reference. If that can get carried over into the piece, it will be amazing. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, just making it like more dark and mysterious and like moody. Could be cool. I wonder if that's also the light from behind hitting that fog in the cloud. Yeah, maybe. Because it is really intense, right? Yeah. Cool though. And we're moving on to the next person. Next one up is Giovanni. Where is Giovanni in the list? Over here. My goals are learning more about background and vista creation and improving storytelling skills and material creation in Designer. Okay, that's a lot. But Frida is actually bringing up a good point about like Adam's work. Like the waves take up a lot of the space and they seem to be like a big part of the storytelling, like the strength of the ocean. Yeah, that could actually be like a really interesting take on that as well. Yeah, then that's definitely something to like think about too, Adam. Yeah, I like that. Strength of the ocean. That's some cool. It's like a cool ring to it. Yeah, let's see. Giovanni's work. I was saying that you're trying to improve your storytelling. You're trying to learn about like background and vista creation, and you're learning more about material creation and Designer. Let's go back to like the first person we talked about here. That's a lot to learn in one environment, right? You can section this like artwork up in like really nice divisions though. What I would honestly focus on first is focus on the one up top here, because that doesn't have like any background landscape or anything like that. I would focus on that first, and then once that is done, I would then take it to like something like this, where you can then add like a background to it, right? You always want to focus on the MVP, right? Like the minimum viable product, or like the minimum viable environment in this case. Or I guess we could still call it MVP actually. Like minimum viable portfolio project. It's MVPP, but I don't know if I like the name of that, but yeah. So focus on the MVP, which is going to be like the smallest environment that you can make that still showcases off like the stuff that you want to do, right? So that's what I would start with. Focus on that first, and then move on to like bigger things after. We'll love some feedback on the composition and the layout though. Okay. So if we're gonna focus on this guy, we need to focus on what are we showing? Like, what are we focusing on, right? Like, what's the focal point? That needs to be established like pretty early. Because right now, the majority of the scene, which is like all of this stuff, is kind of just like equally lit. So I don't know where I'm supposed to look in like this mass, right? I don't know where you're trying to direct me to. If there was like, I don't know, like a little light over here, and we have like a pretty intense light in the foreground, then you're trying to pull us here. But right now, I don't feel like there is a focus yet in this scene. Then also think about the composition of things as well, right? Because right now you have two focal points, or two potential focal points, that are like just stacked on top of each other. right? So what that means, let's say this is like, we're imagining this as like a final piece, right? So imagine that this is like lit with a light. We're gonna focus on here first, and then we're just gonna look straight here, but we're not utilizing like half of the framing that we did, right? So you want to find a way to direct people from like point A to B visually, right? That's also why usually with like the rule of three, or like the rule of thirds. Sorry, I've been just way too much book time. But that's why this rule exists, right? Because it's like a really easy way to like divide your frame up into like 3 equal parts. And then usually what you would do is you would place like one here and another one here. And then you can build like a visual tool between the two. And that takes you like all over the place, right? You can have this, but then we're basically throwing out like a bunch of the frame, right? Again, you can do that, right? But it's going to be very specific in which cases that you could do that. So for example, I can think about like, I don't know, would this even be? What I'm imagining is, let's say, no, because even then, no, never mind. I can't come up with a good example actually, where you would intentionally like sacrifice like half the frame and half of the space that you have. I'm not too sure. So yeah, I would think about the composition and the framing in those terms, like using the rule of thirds, making sure that you direct people through the frame instead. For example, that's why this one already feels like a little bit better, because we have number 1 over here, and then number 2 is the sun, right? Even though there's nothing too much to see with the sun, but you can have like a beautiful sunset, have clouds intersecting, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's why this one feels better. This one could potentially be cool if you, because you don't necessarily have to use 2 focal points, right? You could have like the singular focal point over here, and then if you just have like the rest of the scene covered in like beautiful scenery, that could be really cool as well. So yeah, could be interesting. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, that would be my recommendation here. So first of all, focus on the MVP, right? That's kind of what we talked about in the beginning. Use the rule of thirds for the composition, right? That's basically the biggest part of the breakdown that we've done. Yeah, I just wanted to add this here, like, don't overwhelm yourself. Doesn't fit. I'm like the kid that starts scribbling, just like runs out of paper. Yeah, it's cool though. I like it. I like that you're sticking to the block out, right? And that you're keeping like the shapes really simple, because that allows you to just like move stuff like left and right. It's gonna make it so much easier. Let's see. Ryan is saying, ambitious. The block out itself is looking solid. The first shot is looking nice on the composition and layout. Could play with turning the cam slightly, maybe to catch the path better. Yeah, you could. You could. Like, what you could do is rotate the camera and like move the house in such a way that you get like a composition like this. Right? So we're... Because I kind of like some of the shapes that are going on, right? So you kind of have like a very defined like wall section over here. And you kind of have like a path leading up. But what then needs to happen is we need to find a way to, I don't know, make this pathway like a little bit more interesting, where you can go like up in a zigzag, and then maybe the house is over here. Maybe a little bit more in the distance. Right, and then you have tent over here, and then something is happening over here. Maybe you have like some blocking shapes here, so that you're not like looking too far in the distance. Yeah, you kind of wanna lead them here first, and then you have like this path that goes up, and it takes you to like the second space over here. Yeah. Beduta Lord, hi Tim. Hello, how are you doing? Yeah, I hope that helps. Making most of the frame. That's always like an interesting part. We grab like a couple of sips here as well, stay hydrated. And then we're going to be moving on to the next person, which is Plex. So yeah. In the meantime, I forgot to mention this for the episode, but feel free to also just ask questions in the meantime as well. Or bring up things like, hey, this was not clear. Right? Feel free to ask questions about those things too. Makes sense. The idea is to make the viewers start from the tent, but the focal point is the cabin. Yeah. Okay. So in that case, you're gonna have to be like very careful with where you place things, right? Because in that case, you probably want the tent to be the first focal point, which means that it's going to be the brightest one, right? Or like, well, in simple terms, if we're only focusing on lighting, it's going to be the brightest one, or like has some details into it. And then you have like a pathway leading all the way to the end where maybe there's like a light burning inside of like the tower as well, right? Yeah. Like I said, it's not too far off. We just have to move the building a little bit and make the path more interesting. Yeah. Yes, looking forward to the changes. Okay. Let's keep the train on trucking. New update for Wednesday. Next update, emissive textures with code and text for display. I think this is great. I like the subtlety of what's happening here. Like we talked about it last time, right? But like the subtlety of the clock being like slightly hinted at as well. I feel like it's nicely balanced too. And I love just the amount of stuff that's in here now. Like it really feels overwhelming. And it's almost like this person is going to be like caved in by just the amount of stuff that they needed. I love that. So this is a great stuff. Love to see it. Oh my god, my hearts. Yeah. So really nice work here. I think especially this shot, the way that you're framing it and kind of using these folders as like a blocking volume, which is like, oh my god, I'm such a big fan of that as well. I like it. You know, maybe this guy over here, push it a little bit down, but we're getting pretty specific already. Yeah, I like what's going on here. All the boxes and papers in the close-up shot is just fantastic. I agree. So that looks really good. The close-up is great. Then we're going to jump over to this part and we can see that it is starting to get there, right? In terms of like contrast towards like the rest of the scene. We're starting to get like a good amount of contrast going. We still need to focus on some bright spots though. Especially the ceiling lights. right? Because now what we're running into is that you did an awesome job with the actual lights inside of Unreal, but the environment doesn't really reflect that just yet, right? Because we have a light source that's like pretty equally lit, like on top of the whole ceiling. But we can definitely see that there's a spot that's like brighter than the rest. So we need to reflect that into the light panels as well. So I would honestly cut down, like let's see. We have like this section here. So like this section of lights is probably gonna be like the brightest. Right? And then the rest of it can be turned down. Just so that the setup that we've done in Unreal is reflective of like the actual environment and the textures as well. So the physical light needs to match the actual Unreal Engine lights. My writing is ugly today. Jesus. And Ryan, I love that you're going there because you're wondering if the closest desk in that shot is too bright as well. I had exactly the same feeling. Like this guy over here. Feels like we need to turn that down as well. I don't know why it's different compared to the other desks. It might also just be, I don't know, that is closer to us as well. But yeah, dimming that down could be interesting. But yeah, it just comes down to like balancing like a bunch of stuff. Where this section needs to be dimmed. And then also, what could be interesting is actually you have these like really interesting bits of like subtle fog happening in the background. I would honestly, okay, I would try. I don't know if this is like a straight up implement, but I would try only having like a slight fog on top of your main focal point and just have the rest of it disabled. When is the next portfolio review? That's a good question, Pedro. So the next portfolio review, they always happen on the second Tuesday of the month. Or the first Tuesday. Oh shit, I'm confused now. Let me just quickly check our Discord. The next one is Tuesday, the 6th of August. If you want to participate, there is a backlog of people right now. But you can go to our website. Let me send you the link. So you can go to this section and fill in the form, and then you can get your portfolio reviewed at some point as well. I think the back catalog right now is pretty long. So you gotta be patient. I was adding spotlights to add some shadow, so I guess I just need to relocate the spotlight. That makes sense. That makes sense. Just making sure that like all the contrast is in like the right places. And then in the fog over the desk, that's like a question mark because I don't know if that's gonna look good. I worry if the whole room will be too dark if I switch off like 80% of the lights. So, is the light currently coming from the emissive texture from the paneling, or do you have fake lights in the environment as well? I'm assuming that you have like a bunch of fake lights in the environment, right? Because otherwise this couldn't be lit differently. I would try it though. Like if you want people's opinion on it, like the way that I would do that is render out like a couple of different variations, right? So you have like one that you find like way too dark, one that's like somewhere in the middle, and one that is like, I don't know, this version, for example. And then let people or myself, let me have a look at it and then see which ones like we prefer and kind of do it that way. It'd be interesting. Emissive plus fake lights for shadows because the light was too soft. Yeah. I would still turn them down though. Like especially like it's not the actual light in the scene that kind of bothers me, right? It's just the emissive paneling because it is so distracting, right? And again, like I'm expecting it to be brighter on top of the area that is like currently more lit up, because otherwise like there's no actual connection between this lit up area and like what would make sense from like the top paneling, right? So we're doing it for logical purposes and then also for like composition purposes too, because that's going to help as well. Yeah, cool. Thanks so much for sharing your workplex. This is looking really nice. You know, doing a great job. Keep it up, buddy. I love the additions of like the desk and like how cluttered it feels now. It feels really, really nice. Yeah, great work. Liz is asking for some feedback on the door that she's making. Got it. We'll try. You got it, Plex. You got it. Let's see. I'd like more feedback on this door before I move forward. I added more damage since last week, but I would like to know if it looks good, and if it's a good amount of damage in detail. So there's a couple of things here. I'm gonna start out with this one actually. Hello, Liz. Good to see you here. Glad you could make it. So, I'm going to point at like a couple of areas. So, these are like all, I'm going to number them. Right, so this is number 1. And we're going to talk about these areas as well. I guess all of these areas. And these are like number 2. And so these 4 are all number 2. So, I'm going to start with number 1. Number 1 is more of an issue of the damage that you added is not really following like what you would expect wood to behave as, right? You did some like really nice damage over here. Like that looks freaking awesome, right? Because that feels like a wooden beam because you have like the top layer and then like there's a layer beneath it that's like slowly chipping away, and you have that like the contrast between like the top layer that is less damaged or like has less density in details compared to like the really rough layer underneath, right? So this is awesome. But it feels like these, and I'm gonna be honest, what this feels like is that you've been working on this door for a lot of time, and it feels like this is just like, oh, I just want to get done with this door. That's what it feels like currently. But you kind of have to have that same mentality as like the other pieces, where you just have to follow the reference and like actually sculpt to like make it feel like wood, right? Because this just feels like you rounded off a corner and just like, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it like that, you know? But it is a really nice sculpt though. Yeah, as Ryan and Coffee are saying. That's what I'm saying. Like there's like a lot of areas where I'm like, yeah, that looks really nice. For example, like the outer beams, they look really nice. Like the interior beams here, they look really good too. There's a lot of really nice stuff going on. But yeah, the damage needs to make sense. Feel like wood. Yeah, the damage needs to feel like wood. So, number 2, what I wanted to talk about is I noticed that you did like these layered sculpts. The reason why I encircle them is because I would honestly always split them up. Split them into like a separate piece. And then also, because that's just gonna make it like way easier to work with, right? If you have like a separate piece, you can just like have like a separate sub tool and just like go crazy and like move it, and like it has like a lot of flexibility. So that's like, I don't know, 2.8. And then 2.B is, this is also a thing where it doesn't look like it's actually built that way. Right? Because you kind of have to look at like the manufacturing of doors and like how they're like built together. And you can have like some really hand carved, like handmade like wooden doors, but they probably wouldn't be made like this, where you have like a plank that's like weirdly overlapping with like a plank underneath it, but then isn't like fastened to it in whatever way. Right, so that would be like a thing where you need to look at your references and make sure that there's that the manufacturing and like the logic of the door like still works, right? It still needs to feel like it's built in a certain way. But it's also yeah. I think honestly the biggest point is definitely going to be that it's just like way easier to work with if you split them up. Yeah. Yeah. Let me know if it has a good amount of damage in detail. I honestly think so. I really do think so. I love the rest of it, right? We went again, like we always do, went straight into the feedback part. I think the rest of it looks really nice. I am gonna give you a tip. Let me see if I can spot it first though. Yeah. I don't think you're doing it at the moment, but this is gonna be like really, this is gonna save you a lot of time, because let's say you split it into like separate pieces. Right, so let's say you have this guy as like a separate plank. What you could then do is you could just like duplicate that on here, rotate it 180 degrees, right? Like just rotate it around, and then you're good to go. Maybe you just do like a slight resculpt of like the all the damage on top of it, right? But you don't have to do that much to make them look like slightly different. And then you can just do that like a bunch of times, right? Where you just like duplicate this section of a plank, just do like slight resculpt, cool, duplicate it, slight resculpt, duplicate it, done. And this is gonna save you like a massive amount of time, because especially you have some like really nicely sculpted wood. This guy over here can literally just be like the same plank with just like slightly different surface treatment, and you're good to go, right? You can just use one really nice plank and then just start duplicating it all over the place to save yourself like a bunch of time and to give you like a really nice looking sculpt with minimal effort, right? Because we want to work smarter. We don't want to work harder, right? Yeah, that's the way that's the way that I would do it, like in the future, where you're just taking something that looks like really nice and then plunk, plunk, plunk. They are all the same plank? Good. In that case, awesome. Doing a great job. Yeah, I was trying to spot, and this is why it's good, right? Because I didn't spot it at first. Or like, well, I didn't spot it. It's just in general. So that's really nice where you optimized it, where you optimized the workflow, but you still like sculpted it in such a way where I couldn't tell. Just flipped it, and in some cases more details. That's awesome then. Yeah, that's great stuff. That is awesome. Love to see it. Yeah. Awesome. That's all I have to say on that, Liz. It's looking really nice though. I really, really like it. Like the parts that I mentioned, you know, like I'm a big fan of like the center beam with like the damage at the bottom of it. It's gonna look so good. It's gonna take a little bit of time to texture that and looking really nice, but it's gonna be awesome. Yeah. Don't repeat yourself. Yeah, exactly. Like honestly, whenever I start repeating myself, I start looking at a way where I can just like do away with that. Like really quickly, either through like an add-on or a script or whatever. Like if I'm doing like very repetitive tasks, I'm just like, there must be a better way, like immediately. Thank you. No worries. Manufacturing logic of the door. Hell yeah. Yeah, because how are you ever gonna use like all the hours that we just spend just looking at like random doors and like photographing them? Like this is what we've been training for all these years, you know? Just like gawking at things that like other people just like walk past and they're just like, what the fuck is that weird dude doing? Just staring at like a door. Or rocks, for that matter. Or taking pictures of like the floor with my feet. Cool. Let's move it on up. Ryan, would you consider to texture this as a unique asset? Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're doing the sculpt, Liz. Like, how would you otherwise do it? I would 100% do that as like a unique asset. I thought that was the whole point. Because otherwise, you've kind of done the sculpt for... Well, I guess you could still use the sculpt and then just slap like a tileable texture on top of it, but that's not going to look good, right? Because you want to have the texturing make contextual sense of where you did like all the separations between like the damaged and like the undamaged wood, right? So you could... I wasn't sure if it needed a tileable for being big. Like a door is generally not too big, right? Unless this is like, I don't know, like a... I don't know, like 4 meters or above? I don't know. Like, I'm not saying that you couldn't texture it with like tileables in a normal map, in 2 normal maps, but the way that we would do it is, especially if you're spending so much time on the actual sculpting, then I would honestly just do like the texture just as a unique thing as well, because you spend so much time on it already, right? You might as well use that information there, because otherwise the only thing that you're going to get from it is like the normal map, right? That would be kind of a shame that you do like all this trouble and you only use like a base normal map and then just slap like a tileables on top of it. I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question though. Thanks for bringing that up, because I mean, it's a part of being vulnerable and learning about things, right? Yeah, if you're spending so much time on it, I would honestly just consider this as a unique asset. Because also in your case, if I remember correctly, like the door is is a focal point as well, right? Or it's gonna be a focal point. Because the rest of the scene was quite monotone in color, right? I was taking some reference for grass and foliage on the side of a trail. Some guy walked past and was asking what was interesting. I had to be like, nothing is for reference. Yeah, I've not had like weird conversations like that because I'm just, I don't know. People don't ask me stuff. And I usually also just, I don't know. The thing that I have like a bunch of times is though when I'm trying to get pictures, but whenever I take pictures, I don't want people in them. That gets really tricky when I'm trying to take like pictures from, let's say, the Parthenon, right? Like in Athens or like a very touristy place. And I'm just like waiting for the perfect moment, like with my camera ready and just being like, oh, it's a good shot. Okay, boop. And then just no people in the picture at all. I don't know. Cool, we gotta keep blasting though. So let's have a look. Let's see if we have like a couple of quick ones because we had Luke in here today, but honestly, the amount of feedback that Luke has already received from Adam is really good. So I'm probably just gonna skip it. Yeah, I mean, you did ask some questions just like an hour ago. Okay, we're gonna dive into it then. Let's see if we have like other people that we can go through quickly. We can condense down the numbers a little bit. Let's see. Oh, calculated design. Skip it. Is that your work then, Luke? Making sure. Theo. Let's move on to Theo first. Little tweaks for tonight's with Wednesday, adding a few little details and changing a bit of the candles. Okay, so no direct questions here necessarily. I think I'm gonna echo what other people said, even though I haven't read it thoroughly. Like the main thing that's like really distracting at the moment is the refraction on the glass. So I would honestly try to fix that before posting it. Because it is like really distorting, and also what's making it worse is that it is reflecting a studio environment, I think, because it is very, very bright. And I don't necessarily expect that to happen. But I don't know if there's like a separate option where you can say, hey, use this reflection for it, but like still light it up with like this studio environment, right? Because the HDRI that you're using currently just makes it like, I don't know, really, really bright, even though the environment itself is like very dark, right? And it kind of takes away from the mood a little bit. But that's about it. Wonder if the grunge plus roughness could be a little bit more textual on the metal. I definitely agree. I think we talked about that last time as well, where what I'm still missing is some of the cohesion, especially where you have interaction between objects. Yeah, so where you have like the skeleton holding on to the telescope, where you have like the base of the glass like on the pedestal, like all those places, like they could still use like a very contextual like interaction between them. But I think that's something that we hinted on last time as well. I think it was more the cohesion side of things, but yeah. Yeah, definitely having like a lot of grunge, or I don't know, like some stuff around here, especially where it's like interacting with like different surfaces, right? Definitely griming that up. And then also having like a difference between like the underside and like the top. I feel like honestly that's the thing, the materials, they do still feel like pretty basic. Or like pretty generic in their approach. So yeah. And that's only focusing on the textures, right? Because like Ryan is saying, like the actual modeling and the complexity of the model, and then just getting that baked down and like textured by itself is already like freaking awesome, right? That's why we're focusing on like all these details, because those details I can only remark on them because like the complexity of the rest of it is so good, right? It's just that I'm using a tileable. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like I assume that you're working with like a limitation there, and that's unfortunately gonna have repercussions, right? In this case, where if you really wanted to take it to the next level, you would then have to look into like using like an RGB mask or something like that to like really push it to the next level. The reason why I was then also like quite hesitant to say something about that is because I know that you're getting pretty close to like just finishing it, right? So it's one of those things where you could take that into account for like the next time, where if you're gonna be using tileables, which is gonna make like the baking part, like you don't even have to bake for like a lot of things, right? If you're doing like pure geometry, which I don't know if that's the case here, but it makes certain parts of the process way easier and way more flexible. But it also makes the part of the process where you want to get like really contextual with like how you're gonna texture things. That is unfortunately like the downside of it, right? Where you then have to look into like RGB masks or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Every workflow kind of has their pros and cons, right? That's something to take into account for the next time, though. Like other people were saying, it's looking really nice, though. Like the complexity of the model, like the way that you approached it, and yeah, looks really good. So great job, Theo. Looking forward to seeing more progress and it eventually being posted as well. I hope it will pass pretty okay on my portfolio, even if that. Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, if you're getting close to that point, then take what we talked about today and just take that to the next project, right? Yeah, thanks all for the feedback. No worries. Happy to help. Any tips for getting better at texturing? There's a whole bunch of tips. The main tip that I would say, just as like a quick introduction, is focus more on layering and the amount of layers that you do, rather than trying to get a material to look good with 1 or 2 layers. Like, really look at your references and try to like really distinguish like all the individual layers that are going to be affecting like that material. And also think about like how people are using it too, right? Because people leave behind like residue. Let's say if it's a pen or something like that. Like you can look at a pen, like a Wacom pen, and you're gonna see like differences of where like people touched it compared to where they didn't touch it, right? And that's gonna make stuff like feel really believable. Or just dirt or grime or whatever. But yeah, references are key, and then subtlety is my recommendation. Let's see. I gotta keep track now. So Ryan, let's do you next. Otherwise, I'm just losing track of everything. Turns out that the pipes are the right textile density. Feels like whenever I increase the roughness a touch, they look like a lower res or fuzzy texture. So what could be happening there, and might be worth trying, is I need to think about this. Is looking at like high resolution reflections. I think this is a setting in the render settings for Unreal, where it's then going to sample like a higher resolution for your reflections in your entire scene, and that might help with this as well. Because maybe it's not actually the texture, but the reflections that are being captured by the metal texture that are going to be like a limiting factor here. Which might also mean that your pipes are just like too shiny as well, potentially. Because this is honestly the reason why I bring up like the high resolution reflections, is because that's oftentimes like a limitation that's seen in like architectural visualization renders, especially on glass, right? So I don't know specifically, but like this could be like a thing to look into. And then also there are going to be limitations when it comes to, there's going to be certain limitations when it comes to transitions between metallic surfaces and non-metallic surfaces on like pipes or something like that. It's been a while since I textured them myself. There's probably going to be workarounds, but I'm not too sure, honestly. It's been a while. Number 2, how are the plants looking? I had a look at them like earlier. Let's see. Plants are looking quite nice. I think the one in the foreground feels a little bit too dark, or like it's missing like subsurface scattering or something like that. Or just like too dark in general. Yeah. But it's only that one. I think the other ones look quite nice. That's why they get more light as well. So that's why, that might be why they're looking better than this guy over here, because it is going to be like more in the dark. So yeah, it's only that one in the front, really. Yeah, sometimes you might have to move like a little bit away, because it feels like this guy is too dark just in general in the foreground. Because yeah, you gotta take into account that this picture, there's already like post-processing that has been done on top of it as well, right? So you kind of have to think about it as like, okay, I'm gonna light this foliage as it would normally look like, and then like do like post-processing on top of that, and like maybe tweak the shadows or stuff like that. Pew pew pew. Differences of an environment artist versus a level artist. What portfolio should each other look like? Let me answer that in just a second. We're gonna look at Ryan's work, and then we can dive into that for a minute or two. Let's see. I don't have an eye for issues with foliage yet. Aiming to expand my minimum. Blah, blah. And then number 3, I have callouts for what I'm seeing that I plan to update and add in next week. Just want to make sure that I'm steering off in the wrong end. Let's have a look. For this plan over here, I might need to open the original one because... So, We have like a seam over here. That's like a bug fix. That should be easy. I'm actually open the image in here as well. Second pass, focusing on cleaning up mistakes. Bring over the remaining elements. Oh, I got some decals here as well. Some stuff over here. Planty boys. Maybe. You could potentially do those things. Like, you can probably find like some mega scans. Oh, I know that's not too visible here, but like these plans at the bottom, you could potentially do with like some mega scans, right? Even just like base mega scans. I don't know what they have. But it doesn't need to be like 100% like the ref, right? Unless you're going for that, then yeah, spend some time on that too. More texture breakup, darken and stain decals. I think that's good, just to vary this up a little bit more, right? Same like we're doing for like the railings, right? Just slight differences are gonna make this environment shine, right? Texture, offset handles. No, I think this looks good. This is looking really good. I think you got a solid plan, man. The plan looks good. Approved. All right, cool. Thanks for sharing the update, Ryan. Looking forward to more updates. We probably pull those directly from Megascans for the bottom plans, not just the Atlas. Yeah, exactly. Like try using as many shortcuts as you can when it comes to it. Let's talk about the differences between environment artists and level artists. So, environment artist to me is more of like a generalization of like everything that needs to happen in the environment by itself, right? So by that account, like a level artist is actually a part of environment art, where a level artist is going to focus more on like actually building the environment art or the environments or like the locations or points of interest with pre-existing assets, right? And they're going to focus more on storytelling and location and world building and all that kind of stuff, compared to, again, an environment artist who's going to be like more of a jack of all trades, right? If you look at the industry right now, I would say that a lot of environments are level artists first, but they do have like other specializations as well. This is like a big generalization, but from where I worked, that seems to be the case, where it's like you get to build worlds and then you have your specialization as well. So, for example, for me, that's like I can build like a level, but I can also work with like terrain. I can also build like complicated assets when it comes to it. I'm not that good at like singular assets, but I can make like really complicated assets with like trim sheets and all that kind of stuff, like all that technical stuff. And what would the portfolio look like for each one? They would look like really similar, because what you're doing as a level artist is basically what's recommended to have on your portfolio anyway, as an environment artist anyway. So as part of you becoming an environment artist, you're gonna be doing like set dressing and making sure that your work tells a story and that you can make like really pleasing compositions, and that is the bread and butter of a level artist. So the portfolios look the same. It's just whenever you're joining the industry, it might be like a different specialization that you go into. All right. Who do we have next? We got Joe Bates over here. Hello, Joe. Currently working on improving the block out, and was wondering if you could have like any general feedback and composition mainly. Let's stick to the composition. I mean, it's nothing too fancy, right? I like this composition more because you kind of have like a nice curve going into it. And it's also like a bit more offset to the right. So I kind of like this in terms of composition a bit more. That's my favorite. This guy. Untitled? Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Like that's what I was saying, that level artists are usually not advertised as like a specific job role. It just becomes like a part of your role as an environment artist. So for example, when I was working at when I was working on Far Cry, 90% of the work that I was doing, like 80 to 90% of the work that I was doing was level art, but I was an environment artist, right? So usually when people say, or when the openings or applications say that they're looking for environment artists, a large part of your responsibilities might still be level artist based, but they just don't advertise it that way. And that's where it gets like really tricky, because some companies do advertise level artists, right, as like a specialization, but most companies don't. Just as, for example, if you look at a company or like applications for like a company like Guerrilla Games, they have really niche like job openings. They had a job opening that was bunker artist, specifically designed to make bunkers. You know? So when it comes to like you're saying, where like, hey, Naughty Dog and Sony Santa Monica and Rockstar don't have level artists, it's just because they call it a different thing, but they're doing the same thing though. Right? Like you're saying as well. What about technical artists? Can an environment artist jump easily to tech art positions? Easily? No. Tech art is really difficult to get into because that requires you to go into like programming, right? So we're talking in most cases Python, or learning like a shader language, like I'm not too familiar with them, but like HSLS. No, high level shader language, right? So HLSL. Oh my god, those acronyms, man. But yeah, I would say like you're going like a whole different direction, and you're gonna focus more on like building tools, improving workflows, optimizing on a bigger scale, like all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I knew the acronyms, but it just was like breaking my brain because for some reason I have to think in like Dutch and like English at the same time. But yeah, it's not an easy thing to jump between. Definitely not. Or otherwise, most companies wouldn't have issues with like hiring technical artists, because there's a lot of job openings for those. Horizon line, it might be a bit low in the frame of the composition on the first shot. Looking good on the whole. Yeah, I think that could be interesting to look at. Like trying to look at some of these compositions is what makes it nice. I feel that once you start looking at things from like the eye level, like that's when it becomes really interesting, because then we can like see ourselves in those positions, right? So that's one thing. Camera at eye level. Otherwise, yeah. Henrik is saying maybe something in the foreground. I agree, but there's only so much that you can do with a simple scene like this, right? Like like I said, like I would love to see like what you're gonna do story wise here, or if you just want to make a pretty picture. But pretty pictures usually have less of an impact on your portfolio, right? So if you want to have like a big impact on your portfolio, there needs to be a story that's happening there. I had always seen that tech artists are more for senior jobs, isn't it? No, not necessarily true. You can become like an entry-level tech artist. You just have to be, yeah, you just have to be like knowledgeable about those topics. I think a lot of people get into technical art when they know like a lot of Python and they've built like tools that other artists already use. So for example, that's like a really effective way of becoming like an entry tech artist, is just like building tools for either yourself or other people around you that can help improve their workflow. With whatever that means, right? It's pretty broad. But yeah, Joe, I don't really have too much to add. Let me see what else you said. I'm also not sure of which angle I prefer at the moment. I definitely prefer the top one. It gives like the frame like a bit more space, and it's not just like only the bridge. But I would say that like having a lower down angle would probably be like pretty interesting. I also think about adding a boat underneath the camera could look cool in the reference, but I'm not 100% sure yet. You could do that. I would not make it that big of a part of the foreground though. Like I would have it like where the front of the boat just comes up to here. And that could be interesting. So yeah, because you don't want to take too much up of the frame, right? You don't want to make it feel like this, right? Where like the boat is like almost touching the bridge, and there's not enough breathing room here. You could almost do something like, I don't know, like have like a boat like slightly coming into the frame over here, and then maybe have like a boat like all the way in the distance or something like that. Could be cool. I have a problem with that. I excel a lot as a level artist, but I'm already working in the studio in that position. But if I myself want to move into environment art, modeling is a bit difficult for me. Well, the thing is, you gotta look at, or this is the way that I look at things, right? Especially if you're already in the industry and you're only relying on that one skill, that makes you really vulnerable for like future job prospects, right? So I would honestly look at it from like, it's a necessity for you to like thrive in other places as well if you want to move somewhere else. It is difficult, right? Like getting into like anything else, it is difficult, but it is worthwhile if you want to be more future proof, right? For the future. Okay, Joe, I hope that helped. Looking forward to seeing more stuff in the future. I think we're gonna skip you for today, Luke, because we're already over the mark. There's still like 4 people left as well. Plus, you got like a whole bunch of like awesome feedback from Adam as well. So sorry for skipping you this time around, but feel free to share your work next time, and then I'll put you in front of the queue though. Keep that in mind. Is it more common to go from art to tech art or from programming to tech art? It's more common to go from art to tech art because it's really difficult to go from programming to tech art because you don't know what you're building for the artists, right? Because tech art comes down to like improving the lives of artists around you, right? Like building the tools, building workflows, building optimization things. That doesn't mean that you can't go from programming to tech art, because you can get that context as well. But there needs to be like an inherent interest in art from that side as well. So I know a lot of people that kind of like grew into tech art from like being an artist, and they just had like an interest in doing like stuff on the side with like blueprints or geometry nodes or Houdini or Python, all those kind of things, rather than the other way around. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Good to go. Awesome. Thank you so much, Luke. Let's see. McFell, you are up next. So let's have a look. What can I help with today? Feedback on the block out. If you have any thoughts on the camera angle as well. So this is the main camera angle. I'm not a big fan of it yet, because it just feels like we're not seeing too much of it. But I can see something cool happening here, especially if you're working with like, I don't know, like a ship in the background or something. It could be interesting. Cool. But I'm already liking where this is going. Right? Like way more informative. Like now, well, you got the characters here, right? Which is kind of cheating. But I feel like just the assets are like more descriptive of like the actual size. There is still like oddities like this where like this feels like too big for what a character is in comparison. My idea was to make the space part more interesting later. Yeah, you could do that, and you could get away with like a lot of things in space, right? You can make it like pretty simple. But yeah. Yeah, the staircase, like it's still, or like the ladder is still too big, or like too wide, especially. You got a door there as well. It's looking cool. Yeah. Overall, I like it way more, man. It's looking real good. So the shapes add a lot of scale. That's looking awesome. Probably don't have too much to say. Like I feel like the rest of it comes down to just like the design that you choose to go for, right? That's not my wheelhouse necessarily, but I think like Ryan is saying, great improvements, feels way more logical. I can really feel like the scale of it, especially because we have a ton more small objects as well, like these guys. Like, even though like I kind of know, I don't really know what they are, to be honest. I think it's more like a solar panel or something like that. It can fold open. But yeah, they do a really good job of adding smaller detail that makes it feel like this building is like really huge, you know? But I like those things. Just for that. Hey, thanks for the sub, Standard. Appreciate it. Let's see. Right out the new shot. I see the appeal to the main shot composition. Just make sure to showcase it. We'll just make sure it showcases the work well, would be my thought. Yeah, you don't necessarily want to do that most of the time, right? Because then, I mean, not in your main shot, right? Like your main shot should be focused on like just the art, and then you can showcase like all the stuff you did and like the breakdowns as well, right? Yeah. The doors to the side, they definitely help a lot as well, even though I covered it with like my silly arrow over here. Definitely help too. But yeah. Not too much to add here, just looks good, man. Looking nice. Honestly, great job on, like, yeah, translating the scale. Feels way better now. Let's see. Sulan was also saying, I see a lot of tech artists had told me not to push per se for good Unreal Engine blueprint knowledge for environment art, because I should be focusing on art, and wanted me to have more perspective on it. Yeah, that's one take. I mean, I do agree with that to a certain degree, right? Like, to become like a good technical artist, you should know art. And I feel like for a lot of people, including myself, right? Like, if you get to grips with Unreal Engine blueprints, it feels like you're becoming a tech artist, but it's not really though. Like, it is a good way of getting into visual scripting, right? And like node-based scripting and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, to become a real tech artist, you need to know programming languages. Like, there's no way around it. Because I know a lot of artists that can do like blueprints and they can do like visual scripting and all that kind of stuff, but none of them are tech artists. Looking forward to updates, says Ryan. Yeah, me too. Okay. Thanks for the feedback, Tim. No worries. Happy to help. Stone pillars like shown above are going to be along the path. The theme of the project is going to be something like the Lost Wanderer. One specific question I have: what's the best workflow for building a building like this? Oh, sorry, we had the wrong person up here. What's the best way of building a building like this? Okay. Sure. Well, let's do that. So, base of the building. Right, this is going to be number one, right? Number one is simply going to be tileable. Tileable texture. Not going to do anything complicated. If you want to get a little bit more complex, even though yours with this current composition is going to be so far in the distance that it's not going to really matter, is that you can deform the edges based on the tileable that you're going to be using, right? So you could do like bunk, a little bit of like a silhouette change, but you don't need to actually change the texture. You're just like pushing and pulling a little bit. That would be more than fine. Then for the pillars, because it is so noisy, you would have like, hold on, let's these are like stone, let's call them slabs. You could honestly technically use the same material that you have here for the tileable stone slabs, remove the pattern from it, and then you have like a base material that you can just slap onto the pillars. If I'm feeling really lazy, and most of the time that I do, like, I would honestly just do that. So what we're doing is we're just removing the tiles, and then the rest of the texture, we're gonna have to add like some sort of like a different base to it, right? Yeah. We could use that to create like a tileable stone. Right, so that's the pillars. And then, like Ryan is saying, looking at that lovely moss, we just need to make like a tileable for moss as well. That's going to be like our third tileable. Do like a tileable for the roof as well. And then what I would do for the roof. So let me actually. do this instead, since we're going to be talking about the whole thing anyway. So, number one was quick and dirty. We're just going to clean this up a little bit. So, number one, number two, number three, that's the moss. And then number four, it's going to be the roof. That's the way that I would break it up. So we turn that tileable slabs into just like a tileable stone, right? Literally using the same graph that we made in Substance. And we're just removing like the tileable pattern from it. Or like the slab pattern, right? Make it like tileable stone. Number three is making the moss. And then number four is making roof tiles. And since you have access to the lovely PDF, or like the Environment Art Handbook, look at height to geometry. Because that technique will be really helpful here. So we're going to take the height map that we create for this tileable, and then we're going to be slapping it on the plane, and we're going to use the height map to like actually make and deform that plane to make it look like an actual tiles. That's what I would do. And then vertex paint everything together. And then, like Ryan is saying, have some height blending in there because you have height maps anyway. So yeah, that moss is going to be very satisfying. Yeah, 100%. 100%. So that's the way that I would build it. Pretty quick. And then just slap like a bunch of ivy on top of it. You could even use this height map to geometry trick. You could use that on the moss as well. And then you could create like little clumps of moss that you can just like sink into certain sections, right? Because what could be cool, and again, this is more for if you're getting closer, right? But you could actually have like a clump like this, have it like an actual mesh, and then just like snap a tileable on top of it, do that height map trick, and you just like deform the whole thing a little bit. So you create like a volume. But you could use that for like a pillar mesh. You could use that for like, I don't know, let's say a cluster that has like a little bit more deformation. You can use that for a lot of stuff. Yeah. That's how I would do it. Henrik is saying node-based scripting is also pretty restricted to nodes, languages, most of the time not. Yep, exactly. Exactly. I think honestly, like node-based stuff is like a good introduction if you've never used like a programming language at all. But it's like, you know, like you said, it's going to be pretty restrictive. Oh no, I'm missing one. Let's see. Justin. My questions are, based on what you can see on image number 2, image number 2 is this guy over here. Let me make a note of that. So, image number 2. I have followed the silhouettes and layouts. Wait. Yeah, okay. I have followed the silhouettes and layouts I found interesting to use in my level. However, I feel like my piece still looks too straight and too clean compared to the references. How can I make the edges look more worn down? I have bevel to remove any hard edges, and my only idea is to add more geo, but this is viable in production studio viewpoint. So dark again. I am honest. Oh, you're talking about this stuff. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you need to break this up. Like all of these areas, you need to add like more geo to it and just wherever there's like a separation, right? Just have like a little bit more geometry. Because the silhouette is like really where like all the juice is, right? So you can't negate that. Yeah, really playing around with like the geometry and like working with the tileable. Like really make it stand out. I'm being like pretty subtle here, but you definitely want to make the most of it. Most of the areas look pretty decent though, even though it's like somewhat hard to see. And if you're dealing with like stuff like this, I don't know if you're already using like POM or not, but that might be like a good location to use it. And pretty hard to tell. It looks like it has like deeper cuts, so I'm assuming that something is happening there. Might already be POM. If it is, love. If it's not, use POM. But yeah, you can. I know I made like the pictures like pretty small, right? So that's not really helping our case here. You can see that a lot of this stuff actually has like a really. Oh, look at this! You got some really good ref here. Like the way that all the shapes are like broken up, like looks really nice. You know, like you have a split between like all the geo. That's the way that I would approach it too. And this is usually where it becomes required to do like a combination between two techniques, right? So usually we have it because right now we're relying a lot on the tileable. Which we can add geometry to, right? That's fine. But what would be ideal is that geometry, if we're gonna do that across like the whole scene, that's gonna be like really painful and like time consuming. What I would actually look at is have separate stones that you can then use in certain cases where you kind of want the silhouette to have like that extra pop, right? So for example, here, this silhouette, I want to see like a lot of these cuts. Like where you have like a separation between like the individual stones and maybe like one of them is like a little bit more offset. That's really important for cases where like silhouette needs to pop, right? But the tricky thing here is that now you've done it with like a texture only, but we need supporting geometry too. Something like this you could do with geometry by itself. But if you want to do that with like the whole scene, you need some sort of geometry. It looks like you already have like a bunch of stuff lying around anyway. Even though some of that could be like more broken up than it currently is, you could still use that to make like some of these pieces more interesting. Especially on the silhouette. So yeah, it always needs to be a combination of texture and geometry, right? They need to work hand in hand. And now we're relying a bit too much on the texturing compared to the geometry. So yeah, more geometry. And with like the separate stones, you can really control like how dense you want to go, right? Because usually if you want to apply that on like a large surface that's based on a tileable, it becomes really annoying and a lot of handwork. Or otherwise, you need to use like the height map technique that I was talking about before. But then you're going to introduce like a lot of cleanup that you have to do on like complex surfaces. Because for example, with like roof tiles, you can just really easily do that with like a decimate modifier and it's going to look pretty good. Whereas with like complex surfaces, you're probably gonna like run into like more issues, even though you could still use it. Cool. So question, let's see. I have beveled to remove any hard edges, and my only idea would be to add more geo. But is that viable from a production studio's viewpoint? Yeah. Like, the thing is, like, when you have like really dense, like up close geometry, that also means that you can really quickly like reduce that depending on like the distance of the camera, right? So let's say, apart from the silhouette, right? But let's say on most like flat surfaces, you have, let me see if we can find like an example here. So for example, we're looking at like this object over here, right? And like, let's say all of this stuff has like a really intricate, like detailed geometry, like all over the place. And there's like a bunch of insets, like a bunch of bevels, all that kind of stuff. If it's really dense, once we start getting away from it, we can just really easily optimize it. So yeah. What model of pen tablet do I have? I have a Wacom. I don't know which one. It's one that has a screen and it's 16-inch. I don't know what they're called again, but like that's the one that I have. So let's see. So yeah, LODs can play a huge thing. That doesn't mean that you need to create LODs, but if you then tell people that like, hey, the way that I would do this in a production environment is that I would have like just really aggressive LODs, that's enough, right? That convinces me that you thought about this and that you know how to optimize it, even though like you don't show it off necessarily. So second question. On image number 3, which is this guy over here. I'm finding a similar problem. I'm trying to create some destroyed areas on my level, but I still get this artificial look towards it. Yeah, so in this case, like nothing is really blending together. You have, like you're saying in the previous thing, right? Like nothing, like everything just feels like it's just like a stone that's on top of another stone. It's on top of another stone. What I would expect is that I would love to see like more debris, you know, and like the pieces, the bigger pieces are a part of that debris, but I want to see like more like dirt coming into play as well. And then you could have like little chunks of like debris coming into it. But that dirt is actually going to give you like a lot of flexibility of just like blending stuff together. And then once you have a tileable of dirt, then where the magic really happens is that you then also apply that dirt onto the rock itself. And that's going to create consistency between the two surfaces now. Because what is happening right now is that you have a hard edge between like every surface and there's no transition between the two. If you want to make it feel like more natural, for example, let's see. Let's move this guy over here. So nothing is blending together. Right, so if we have a look at this guy over here, this just feels like a giant rock that just fell from the sky and it just landed there, but it didn't have an impact on like anything around it. Whereas you would normally feel that like, oh, this is a giant piece of rock. It would like leave at least like a crater or like a dent. Or the easier way is to just have like a little bit of like sand pile up. You know, so you would have like an island next to it. And this could be like a generic sand pile to a certain degree. It kind of just is built up next to the whole thing. But the most important thing is that we're breaking up the hard edge that transitions between the two surfaces. Right? Is that we have the sand, and then the sand on top of the rock, and then the rock itself. Right, so we're doing like 3 steps to like build a transition between all of it. And if you do that on all the surfaces, everything is going to be more consistent because we have a transition between everything. Because it's the hard edges that make stuff feel really fake. There's another thing that can happen with, like, help with this as well, is that if you don't want to do this approach, I kind of just want to see, like, I don't know, like stones that are like jutting out from underneath it to kind of indicate that this like fell from the sky and like just punched into like the floor, right? And like a miniature crater or something like that. But yeah, we just need to reduce like the amount of hard edges that we see all over the place. Right? With like architectural pieces, that makes sense. Especially, well, that makes sense to like where the architectural pieces are sort of coming together, right? But even there, like a little bit of like dirt between the two could help a lot. So yeah, we would have like, we technically call these like transition meshes. But you can also do a lot of really cool stuff with decals too, especially projected ones. You do a lot of cool stuff. For the final 2 images, any thoughts towards the current state of my level? Anything I have overlooked that needs to be pointed out? Currently the working assets for the focal point, the bell, and the pottery. The last thing, I wanna talk about noise again. That's going to be the most important thing here, because if you look at this area, it's just all noise. Right? You have like a little open area here and here maybe, but the rest of it, like, it's just all noise and it becomes like really hard to read. What I would try to do in this case, if I were to like just duplicate that over, can I just do it like this? There we go. What I would do is keep a central corridor like really clean. Like really clean, and try to reduce like the amount of dirt. Right, and then maybe you could have like multiple corridors if you wanted to, but I want to see like some sort of path that is gonna take me by the hand and like focus me towards like an area. Right, and then the rest of it can be like really noisy and really chaotic, but now we have contrast between the two, and that contrast is gonna guide us through the whole scene. So it's rest versus detail. Right? We want to create like combination, like a contrast between the two. That's really, really important. And that's something that you always need to keep in mind, right? Because even this screenshot, even if we apply like this sort of stuff, which is already going to help a little bit, where we're going to just like blend everything together, especially if that tileable that we're going to be using for sand is easy on the eyes, right? Because we want to reduce the amount of detail in a shot like this by bringing something in that is going to help us do that. So in this case, like, this is a perfect example of having something that looks off, but you making like a creative decision of like, hey, I know that this is like too chaotic and I know that I need to blend stuff together. So we then pick something that works for both, right? Do that with like a really subtle like sand texture or something like that. We want to reduce noise. And like Ryan was bringing up as well, clustering the debris is definitely going to help with that too. But yeah. Cool stuff though. Definitely making good progress. Like all the assets are looking really good. It's it's this stuff that's going to make them all like, oh, it's going to be so tasty to look at. Bringing it all together. Is it a screen tablet or a non-screen tablet? And is it better for sculpting? I've got no idea for sculpting because it's been a couple of years since I've probably sculpted everything. Like anything, really. I mostly use it for like overpaints, but it is a screen tablet though. Yeah. Best of luck, Justin, and thank you for posting your work. And then we have Andy as the last one for today. I think Andy already received like a bunch of really good feedback as well. So I think... Oh, it's Sulan in the chat. Hey, Sulan. Just made that connection now. But I think there's not going to be too much that I can add to this. Oscar is doing a great job of already helping you with a lot of stuff here. It is looking really nice though. I like the shape of it. It has like a really unique shape. Looks cool. Looks fancy. Oscar gave great feedback. Yeah, he really did. Yeah. Great optimization. Hell yeah. Looking nice and clean. Looking real nice. I honestly don't know if I'm going to add too much to this one. I think Oscar just came in and stole my thunder. But I'm happy. I'm happy for you to do so, Oscar. Thank you so much for helping out with that. This is great. It is hard to find a balance between exaggerating them, but still don't go too soft or wobbly, but this is great. Yeah, this is also one of the things, like when, for context, we're talking about like the size of the bevels and how big they should be in your high poly and in your low poly, because there's obviously an idea of we need to exaggerate our bevels because that is going to look better in the game because it's going to catch the highlights better. It also has the additional benefit of retaining that bevel for a longer time too. And what that is going to do is that, let's say you have like a tiny bevel and you look at an asset up close, it's going to have that nice rim light, right? It's going to catch the light like really nicely. But if you then take a couple steps away and you look at it again, that bevel is going to be so tiny that you're not going to see that edge lighting anymore. So that's the reason why we usually exaggerate the bevels, because then we can still see that bevel catching like the nice lighting from like a distance. But obviously it's going to be a balance, right? Because you kind of want to have like these nice, like mechanical, like really tight bevels. And then you can like vary that up with like some bigger bevels as well. You just gotta be careful. I think Oscar mentioned the same thing. We don't really have an image for that here. I think it was on the back of the machine. Right where... Oh. Like if you make the bevel like super tight on something like this, like it's going to run into issues where it's not even going to detect the bevel and it's just going to blend the two shapes together. Because you usually also need to be very aware of like the texture size that you're going to have, because it's going to average like the value between like the pixels of that texture, right? I'm assuming for something like this, you're going to go with like pretty high, like with a pretty high like resolution texture, so it shouldn't be an issue. Well, let's say you have a really tight limit of like 1K, then we need to make the bevels bigger again, because otherwise we don't have enough pixels to actually present that bevel on like a pixel level. I know we're gonna go pretty freaking technical over here, but yeah, those are just some of the reasons why we tend to exaggerate bevels on our assets. So yeah, I don't really have that much to add here. I think it's just really interesting to talk about the context of why, and maybe because Oscar like gave like really good explanations. So maybe he mentioned the same thing as well. But it's still interesting for other people to hear this as well. 2K or 4K since I want it to be a hero asset, but I will still try to have a lower LOD with a 1K texture. Yeah, you could do that. Definitely could. Oh, it's so good to be back. So good to be back on Twitch, where we get like cheap viewer accounts like botting. Ugh. Yeah. So I will probably not make any notes. It's just the context that was like really interesting. Which means that I'm just gonna switch back over here. Oh, still 15 people in here? Thank you so much for being here all. Like, I'm never expecting this many people to still be here at the end of it. But yeah, I just appreciate all your time. Thanks a million, Tim. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there was no real feedback, right? But that also means that it's looking good, you know? It's just going to be really nice to see like the bake and the textures come together. I'm really excited for that. Yeah, and thanks a ton for Oscar. I don't know if Oscar is here, but like thanks a ton for helping out with that as well. I'm not gonna make it any longer than it needs to be because like Megfile is saying, it's a long session today. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you all so much for just like supporting this show, supporting Beyond Extend. If you want to become like a member yourself, the link is in the description down below. Megfile, I've been working equally hard as you playing games. How dare you, Meg? How dare you have like a chill life where you like take care of yourself? Can't open my eyes anymore. I'm too tired. Yeah, I might do like, I don't know, like an hour or two of like working on the book because I really want to get those like final pages done so that we can just focus on like the design and like, I don't know, spell checking and all that good stuff. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there, people. Again, thank you so much for being here. And I'll see you, yeah, next week. Next week, I'll be here again. And then, let's see. Next week, when are we having, like, portfolio review? Pretty soon as well. Next week. No, it's the week after that we have portfolio review. So, I'll see you, yeah, next Wednesday then. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Thanks for the stream. Thanks for being here, Henrik. And thank you so much, yeah, for just chilling out and all the good questions. And now go have a nice evening where you just chill out. Bye, people.